Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on January 10th, 2023 at approximately 4:29 p.m. PST. Well, I returned to this world for one primary reason, and that is to remind people that working together, we can make this a better world for just about everybody. Now, I bill myself as a spiritual guide because every tool I offer is a tool that, if it applies to me, I personally use it. And any of the philosophies of life I talk about are ones that I personally live by. Now, we start off with the obvious issue here with Nathan from the Quantum Show coming in with the gold, and we have Cliff coming in with the silver. Now, I just have to take a look at something here before I really get into it. As requested, we are talking about past lives today. So we're going to discuss how they come about, what they're for, and if you've got questions, absolutely, put the questions. Remember, put the questions in all caps in the chat room, because frankly, if you don't, the odds are I'm not going to be able to see them. Okay, now I've got two requests here that I know of, and I'm still working out how to get all of this working straight, which we've discussed before. So, taking a look. We do not need that. Okay, now we have the link that was requested by a few people. So I'm just going to put that where it needs to be, just to give those people the direct connection. It's really weird. I'm starting the things. Well, it's weird from my standpoint, maybe not from yours. Okay, so what I'm doing is just popping the links in as best I can. And Joe, you are in with the bronze. Welcome aboard. There's been a lot of questions, and I've listened to a lot of different ideas as to how past lives come into balance. Now, myself, I have actually physically documented, I believe, 18 of my own past lives this lifetime. So again, this is not a question of my doing a whole pile of research, as in reading up on what other people have experienced. Again, this is, from my standpoint, firsthand knowledge. Okay, it's firsthand experience. But with this in mind, do understand I am not the only person that has dealt with past lives. I do not necessarily have all the answers. Okay, however, I'm not about to lie to you to make you feel better about it. So we start off with this. The corporeal body it's kind of like a vehicle. If you take a look at your corporeal body, your physical body this lifetime, okay, it will run for a certain amount of time. Look, I am not apparently looking at this. There we go. It will, and I should have taken this off, so pardon me here for half a second, because I am going to overheat early. And I don't know about you, but my overheating is usually a bad thing. But, JCL, how you doing? Glad you could join us. And you are in with honorable mention. The reality of past lives, if you take a look at your corporeal body as a vehicle, okay, in normal, in standard line, okay, you get a car or a motorcycle, doesn't matter. Eventually the thing will wear out. When it does, you wander around until you get another vehicle. You debate what type of vehicle you want. You talk to people that have had that kind of vehicle. and then you go around, and then you go and get one. Okay, get the vehicle you decide on. Now, that said, the average turnaround time when somebody passes away, the average turnaround time is 70 Terran years if you're going from a human incarnation to a human incarnation. Hey, Carlito, how you doing? Glad you could join us. Okay, now if you've got a car, okay, and your car breaks down, you have to replace it. You don't forget. Okay, you really don't forget, usually, everything you learned in the last vehicle. The same applies to past lives, to reincarnation. When you reincarnate, your soul, which is what drives the corporeal body, your soul still remembers things. But because the physical body cannot hold all of that information, okay, it's been tried before, it usually burns the body out. Because of that, what ends up happening is the soul simply leaves what in today's world we call hot links, okay, to the Akashic records. This way you can access the information if you remember how. Okay. And if you don't remember how, that's not a big problem, because there's a lot of people out there that can actually help you and guide you in regaining access to that. Okay. Past lives, when we're looking at your past lives, there are a lot of different questions, and for pity's sakes, people, if you have a question, absolutely ask. Put it in the chat room again in all caps so that I can find them. But there are a lot of questions that are going to be floating out there. You may be looking at your question going, well, I don't know if that's a really necessary question. After over 100,000 clients in my lifetime, I can tell you, if you've got a question, the odds are there are other people out there that have the exact same question or one close enough to it that it'll work. Now, just to give you a short rundown, I've done this before, okay, but to give you a short rundown from my end, okay, I remember such things as the origin of the human race, how it came to be in. Now we're just going to jump right into it. As most of you know, okay, I do have a tendency of reading out of the chat room. Okay, Joe, number one, and Joe has just asked, can our dreams give us a past life? Give you the past life? No, but your dreams, at least not that I've ever seen. But can they reveal, and often do they reveal, a past life or a fragment thereof? The answer is yes. And the way you can tell that it is a past life, okay, is there will be, first and foremost, an emotional bond to it. It won't just be a question of, gee, that was a neat dream or that was a weird setup. There will be something that reminds you, that really feels tangible in that you wake up with coming out of that dream. Raven, glad you can make it. I did read your note. Okay. Glad you got the flood under control before it got to be really damaging. I've had floods myself and they are no fun. Okay. But very happy you made it. Very happy you made it. That did not come out well. Okay. Yeah, when like I said, I remember when mankind first started to wake. And if you're going down that road as far as religion goes, and you got to be careful. Okay. Every one of the past lives that I've documented, I've had at least one other person that has corroborated, unrequested, the events that I remember. Okay. So dream, when you're looking at a dream, be aware. Not only can dreams bring about the memory of them, but there is a danger that you read about somebody, you read a person in history, and you're going, "Oh, I was Queen so and so, I was King such and such." Okay, I will tell you, there are way too many people that I've talked to personally that have said, "Oh, I was King Richard the Lionheart in a past life." This is going to sound bad because it comes straight out of Highlander. There can be only one. Only one person can have been that person. Can have been a person out of history, and not all of our past lives are real exciting or real mind benders. Okay, in the where were we in 1828? So in the late 1700s, early 1800s, I was a fisherman up in Northern Ireland. As a matter of fact, I can tell you wholeheartedly and this one, there was a lady up north that I went to do a reading for. Well, in all fairness, I didn't go to do the reading. I happened to go to the restaurant she was working in when she recognized me from that particular lifetime. So in the early 1800s, I was actually a fisherman in Northern Ireland. As a matter of fact, you go to Dublin, Ireland, you go due northwest until you hit the Atlantic coast. That's where my fishing village was. Okay, and I've got all kinds of memories that went with it. Okay, and no, I still do not know how to fish. Okay, I was good at it back then, but this is not the reality for me. Okay, yeah, I just gotta double check something here. Okay, sent that. That's a good thing. Just wanted to make sure I'd remember to hit enter when I passed on a link to somebody. Now, past lives themselves can bring back memories. Okay, you can tap into past lives to remember skills that you had back then. Too bad I wasn't a mechanic in the early 1900s. Right, I spent from 1898 to 1956 living in Chicago, Illinois. And boy, I will tell you, I was an absolutely violent individual that lifetime. The answer there, JCL, is yes, you can. Okay, what JCL has asked is JCL asked, I was wondering if we could bring past skills to this lifetime or whether it's hit or miss. It's almost hit or miss when you're born. It's not hit or miss, really. It's a question of, I'm going into a new lifetime, so I'm not taking that with me. But now that you're here, through meditation, you can reach into a past life and remember a skill. Okay, you can absolutely do so. Have I done a lot of that? No, but then again, well, that's not entirely correct. Okay, now remember I said I am a pacifist. Okay, I'm a firm believer that physical conflict this lifetime should be relegated to okay, self-defense, story, books and movies, or mutually agreed upon combat arts, things like boxing or your MMA, where everybody or karate or any of them, okay, where both parties are going. I know that we're getting into this. Starflower, welcome aboard. I'm glad you can join us. Ultimately, the answer is yes. The past life. The Starflower is just asking: does past lives teach you physical and emotional lessons to carry over? The answer is yes. Your past life may well be having direct impact on this life. Okay. When I in 1828, my girlfriend and would have been wife, had she not been murdered. Okay, she was murdered when I came back into this life, into when I reincarnated. Um, okay, let's shorten that or clarify it. 1828, she was murdered by her ex and by her betrothed. Okay, in 1833, I died of a broken heart. In 1898, I was born into, and that was up in Northern Ireland. In 1898, I was born into a military well, into a family in the Chicago suburbs. Okay, and in 1950, but when I was born mad. I was angry at everybody because I'd watched my girlfriend from the lifetime before get murdered, and she was carrying our child. Okay, Nathan, how you doing? Glad you could join us. Oh, that's okay. Don't panic on that. That's technology, but we are quite seriously only 15 minutes into the show, so this is not a bad run at all. So when I came in 1898, I was already angry. By the time I hit 16 years old, I had already racked off that I can think of off the top of my head. Now, bear in mind, by 1916, I had already had eight murders under my belt. Told you I was a very violent individual. Okay, now 7 of those happened the same night. Yes, 7 happened the same night. So was I qualified as a mass murderer? Not at all. And before anybody goes there, no, the reality of it is I do not recall my name, but I do know that it was 1956 when I died in Chicago Memorial Hospital. So I mean, the reality is, yeah, I do appreciate. Raven's just adding that in your astrology chart, your south node will be the same size as the sun sign of your most recent past life. Now, if I take a look at that, I need to go to, and that's a real strange setup because I've actually got myself this lifetime. I've actually got 2 birthdays. Okay, one being May 13th, 1963, when I was actually born. I actually died that day as well. And then on August 1st of 1968, I walked out of the morgue, which created all kinds of interesting situations. But now you've got me a little curious here, and this is one of those funny things that I've actually got the tools to work with. And Raven, I'm absolutely certain that you, of all people, will recognize this funny little book. No, this one I did not write. But I'm just taking a look at it to just bring it into perspective here. 1968, August 1st. We go and look at this. There we are. And that would put my south node over in Libra. Now, of course, the funny thing with Libra is it puts you as a debutante a lot of the time, depending on the rest of your chart, may set you up as essentially a debutante. And rest assured, I really did feel that the world revolved around me. Okay, I felt everybody deserved to suffer the pain I did. And I did my level best to make sure that happened. But you can look at your past lives. What I was told, if we stay on the astrology side of it for half a moment, when I learned astrology, what I was told was that your natal chart essentially gives you a report card from your last life. Okay, these are the skills you're coming in this line with this lifetime. These are your strengths and weaknesses. But if you take the time to really focus on your past lives, you can absolutely, once you pin them down, you can absolutely turn around and bring those memories back and subsequently bring those, if you will, forgotten skills. Because let's not forget, much as you don't come in remembering all the details, the information is accessible from the Akashic records. Okay, now in answer to your to that question, the Akashic records are essentially kept in the hub. They're kept in an information hub. Some of us can get there physically. Some and most require either a liaison to access it for us, or they require, you can get there by astral, by dreamscapes. There's a lot of different ways to get there. Okay. But very, very interesting information you can find. But here's the kicker to it. Without direct permission from the individual whose Akashic records you're striving to access, you won't be permitted to get to those records. Absolutely, many of them are. Raven's just saying many of our fears are carried over from a past life. Quite often, if you've got an inexplicable fear, for instance, I know of people that cannot enter dark water. If they can't see the bottom, they cannot bring themselves into that water. More often than not, this seems to be because they drown. Okay, I know of people that cannot get on a boat. In one particular case, they can't even really look at a cruise liner because they were physically on the Titanic when it went down. Okay, so yes, fears can carry over quite readily. By the way, so can many of the physical ailments that people come in are born with. Now, this lifetime itself is a very special lifetime. Every one of you that is born comes in with a certain amount of a certain number of things that you desire to gain wisdom around. Okay, now you choose what you're gaining wisdom around, but it is not preordained how it happens. What happens is you come in, you work things out, and you come into this lifetime with that goal in mind. But what you end up dealing with is you end up dealing with an issue of what your choices and what your actions and circumstances are through life are what determine how that wisdom is gained. An obvious example, at least obvious to me, is most people that come in with cancer, that end up with cancer, come in to experience what cancer is like. And depending on their choices, depending on their actions, okay, they will either orchestrate their life to end up dealing in the care of people dealing with cancer or suffering from it themselves. In some cases, Raven, but the reality of it is, if you actually had scars from every past life you had, from every injury you had, every single person born would be riddled with scars. Okay, in my case, well, let's face it, I'd be an absolute mess. But the other thing that can happen is a past life can manifest an illness, a birthmark, a scar. It can all of a sudden surface as you're going through life with no functional warning. Because all of a sudden you come back to that memory, you're doing something that brings that memory right to the surface. And all of a sudden, either a physical thing will show up or a mental scar, mental or emotional scar. But again, these are also all healable. Okay. And this is one of the biggest things that you have to look at is we can look at past life trauma and put that to use to bring things into balance, to heal that damage. Okay. Now, one of the things that you've also got to remember, like I was saying, you come in with a certain amount of wisdom to gain. But with this lifetime in particular, it's what I call a millennium jumper. Many of you are born in the 1900s. As a matter of fact, pretty much every one of you. Not quite, but the massive majority of you were born in the 1900s, okay, and are now alive in the 2000s. This is a millennium jumper, and the importance there is that on top of everything else, this is a year to tie, this is a lifetime to tie off the loose ends from the last 1,000 years and to lay out your path for the next 1,000. Now, Joe's just going, I have a fear of death and a fear of snakes. Just seeing someone hold a snake gives me the willies. Those are my biggest fears right now. And the odds are, okay, now I cannot say for certain, but unless you've had a trauma this lifetime that you can pin down, the odds are you brought those with you. Fear of death is quite often because of a particularly traumatic death that you've dealt with. Fear of snakes, the odds are what ended up happening if you don't have that event this lifetime. And you'll know that better than the rest of us will there, Joe. If you had an event that scared the daylights out of you, like my mother who has passed away, well, she passed away 3 years ago now. She was definitely afraid of mice. But when she was growing up, in the home that she lived in, they had a mouse infestation so bad that the mice would crawl down the walls and crawl out of the toilet. Okay, so she ended up absolutely terrified of mice. But that was something that was caused this lifetime. And YJ's just going, I think I know how I died in a past life, and even the actual location. I saw it in a half asleep, half awake dream, and then I researched the actual location on Google Maps. It's exactly as the dream. That tells you right there, this is what I was referring to about corroboration. Okay, by looking at a dream or at a memory that you think may be past life, going to take a look at it, okay, or talking to people that have the knowledge. Like in 1828, I talked to a friend of mine that was actually a history buff. And in 1828, the house I lived in was blue. It was stone and it was blue. I knew it was in Northern Ireland. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine who happened to be a history buff and had studied history his whole life. And he looks at it and I says, the house was blue, but I don't think they were actually painting the houses at that point. And he goes, no. But he goes, they were making houses out of slate. And slate in the North Atlantic, right, did turn blue. So this again is where I got the corroboration. Now, some of the past lives I recall are leaving Egypt during the Great Exodus. I remember Pompeii burning. Broke a good friend of mine at the time. I broke 3 of his ribs trying to stop him from running back down to the city. Well, that could be interesting, but depending on, YJ's just saying, I've often wanted to go dig up my old bones. I think I could wade to the exact spot and find myself. You know, I will caution you against that simply because, depending on what life that's from, the odds are they won't be there, but they might be. Have a happy, it's an interesting outing. I have looked at it and gone, if I get when I get the money to do so, I may go to Ireland. I remember where the fishing village was. Okay. I remember walking around in Stonehenge in its heyday. Okay. I remember, like I said, I remember Chicago. But I'm thinking that Chicago may not be the best place for me to drop back into. But sometimes looking back into past lives, you know, I don't remember the address, but I know in 1760 I owned 3 plantations. Okay. And I don't know where in Louisiana they were, but I do know they were in Louisiana. So going back to them might be a little bit of a hassle. You know, Needless to say, if I remember the great exodus from Egypt, that could be an entertaining setup. Okay, but many times you can bring this information back. Okay, you can absolutely, by looking at your own past lives, and I do encourage you to talk to people in a forum that you feel safe doing so. Okay, to see if there is a link. Some of my best friends this lifetime I met in past lives. Have I, YJ's just asking, have I looked at some of the stories? I've talked to people about them, but have I done any technical, like some of the stories of young kids remembering their past life and solving their own murder or finding a Corsair plane they were in that got shot down? I have heard stories of this, and I've talked to some people where that was literally the way it went. Okay. I've also help people discover these past things. You know, myself, yes. Raven's just saying, many people have healed from past trauma using hypnosis. Do you use it? The answer is yes, I do. This is one of the reasons why, when I came back into this lifetime, I died in 1956, was born in 1963. Now, like I said, the average turnaround time is about 7 0 years. And, if you're going from human to human. So I died in 56 in Chicago, Illinois, in Chicago General. Okay, in 1963, I was born in Vancouver General, living in Richmond, BC. Far enough away that the odds of me running into people from my family in my past life, not really that good. In my last life, that is. Okay. And the reality of it is you've got to be cautious with hypnotherapists. Okay, because if a hypnotherapist is helping draw you back, one of the big mistakes that I find that hypnotherapists make on a regular basis is when they're asking for a description of something, they will inadvertently lead you. For instance, you're trying to get a look at yourself or at somebody you've seen, and instead of saying, can you tell me anything about the person's head? Like, focus on their head. What can you tell me? And let the person come up with, well, they were bald or they had hair. Instead, what the hypnotherapist does is they go, does that person have hair? Okay, is the person's hair black or is it blonde or what have you? And the problem with that is it sets the emotion up and automatically creates a false memory. Now, I do have to ask you, there's one thing here, Joe. Okay. Um, and here's where it gets to be a little screwy, because we got to remember, past lives, there has to be a real separation. There has to be, for it to be a past life, the first qualifier, and really it's just about the only qualifier, is you cannot have a past life in all likelihood unless you're what is called a walk-in, which is a whole other ballgame. Okay. But you said here the year was 1986. Now, for that to be an actual past life there, Joe, this would mean you would have to have been born in 1987 or later, at the earliest. Okay. And somehow you strike me as being a little older than that. Maybe not, though. Eris, glad you could join us. I hope your day has been going really well. Okay. Okay, now Nathan from the Quantum Show is saying, I want to do a regression, can't find anybody to do one in my area. Hey, do you have the one thing, the first place to look? Okay, clearly on the internet, advertise for it. Okay, do I actually facilitate regressions over computer? Not a prayer. Way too many possibilities of complications. Okay. Oh, I'm just looking back up here. Eris originally said, where is he here? There needs to be different categories for trauma since the word has become so watered down. And I do agree with you there. The reality of it is when you're dealing with trauma, okay, there are critical traumas such as when you have died, okay, or major wars. I mean, for the longest time, I wasn't quite certain how I pulled the mess off of my leg. Okay, because I remember a lot of wars. Okay, I don't remember every war I was in, thankfully, but I do remember multiple civilization-ending lifetimes, and usually I seem to walk right smack into them, which concerns me about this lifetime. And that may be the driving factor behind why I am pushing so much now to get people to put the negative past behind them. The biggest challenge, where are we here? YJ's just saying, it's very easy to create false memories. I'm certain that at least half the stuff, at least, is imagination and not memory recollections. Okay, and you are right. Imagination, and this is what I was referring to about hypnotherapists being a bit of a complication. Many of them inadvertently set up false memories. Okay, but this doesn't mean that the past life isn't real. Just some of the details may be a bit skewed. Okay, but where it comes to finding a hypnotherapist, in today's world, there's two ways of looking for one. One is you go and you talk to the people you know. If you know somebody that has had regression done and is content with the outcome, find out who they went to. Most metaphysical shops, if they carry information on tarot, astrology, gems, this sort of thing, many of them will have a list of people that actually do hypnotherapy or actually functionally work with regressions. Okay. In all honesty, Ernest, the first part of my year has been absolute upheaval. Okay, but as of about 3 days ago, I landed solidly on my feet, knowing exactly what I'm doing with the rest of this year. And this channel is one of those things that I am really going to be pushing for. Okay, to bring it up online, to make it a going concern. Other than that, I've got a whole layout, and I'm working on financial projections to make certain that I'm right on top of things. Okay, the trick where it comes to past lives is remembering that you can actually make a real change in the way your life is going by simply looking at what you were doing in your last life. Now, if you think about it, this lifetime, I'm a pacifist. Okay, and I am very strongly working once again to pass on a very simple message. That being that working together, we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. Okay, I have done this in a couple of lifetimes prior. Okay, and I'm not going into some of them because there's way too much controversy around them. So I just leave them alone. Okay, but have I had corroboration on every one of them? Of every one of the ones I've documented, the answer is yes. By at least one and usually multiple different unconnected people. In other words, these two people that have corroborated have no connection to each other. But this is why I strongly recommend, especially if you've been working with dreams, write down, if you wake up remembering something that you think might be past life oriented, do your best to write it down as clearly as you can. It'll come in all likelihood in pieces and fragments. But the trick is you date when you write it down. Here's the date and time that I remember it. Here's what I remember. And as you go through it, you'll have record, you'll get a bigger and bigger picture of how that life went. Okay. It's funny, my entire life I've been fascinated by volcanoes. As it turns out, I was there when Pompeii blew, when Pompeii was buried. And I was there when the Minoan civilization on the northern Isle of Crete was swept into the ocean via the explosion of Mount Thera. Okay, needless to say, that got my attention. But do I fear volcanoes? No. I mean, heck, when Mount St. Helens in Washington State went off, I was living in West Bank, which is a tiny town just south of Kelowna, where I live now, okay, in BC. And we were sweeping ash from Mount St. Helens off of our deck, right smack in the heart of BC. Something, and I know this is going to raise a real chunk of questions and probably some ire. But Joe is asking, tarot cards, is it wise to participate in that? Now, there are two ways of looking at it. First and foremost, from my standpoint, I have no problem with it. As a matter of fact, I use them myself. I've used them for decades. A couple of things to keep in mind, and this is where the ire may come in. Tarot cards were originally built to spread the word of Christianity. Okay, they were literally, when Christianity was first in its budding infancy, the pictures were used to help tell stories, to help bring information forward. Okay, but when the gypsies got a hold of them, the Romanian gypsies figured out how to make money with it. Net result, it took on a real bad connotation. Okay, if you're going to look at tarot, okay, and yes, I can certainly explain a whole lot more of it, but I'm not going to get too terribly caught up in that. Okay, the best of the books that I've seen. When you buy a deck of tarot cards, I'm not going to go get the other one, but I'll grab this one here if it's actually readily available. Oh, where did I put it? Usually I have a deck of tarot cards right handy. But the reality of it is, when my job closed, I quit working with them. Didn't throw them away, but I've been rearranging things. So can I bring a deck to the surface here? Apparently not. Okay. And if I go wandering off to find one, we have another problem. But is there any danger to using tarot? No. But the best of the books that I've seen have between 15 and 20 definitions per card. Now, here's where the glitch is. Absolutely, Raven. I understand you've got a bit of a glitch there that has to be sort of dealt with. Hopefully you'll be back. Remember, if you've got a question that we don't get to, absolutely drop me a line. You clearly have a way to get a hold of me. Okay, so absolutely do. And I will do my best to answer it for you. You know, tarot cards can give you a lot of insight into what you're going through. Which I wish I knew where my deck went. Which always confuses me because things in my house go missing regularly. It's kind of funny in a lot of ways. But there's absolutely nothing wrong, in my opinion, of working with tarot. But the thing you got to remember, the best books have 15 to 20 definitions per card. Now, absolutely, when you're learning, read the beginning where it tells you what the general suits are for. Okay. And what the general side of it is. After that, you got to keep one thing in mind. Okay. And that is that every single card, when you hold it upright, has approximately 8 billion definitions. When you flip it upside down, okay, you have another 8 billion available. Because it's read by the instinct that comes up. Okay. So are they a good, are they a functional method? Absolutely. Okay, the neat part about it is there's a lot of people that will look at regular playing cards and go, those are okay, but tarot cards are a bad thing. Funny part about it is the regular playing cards of today are an evolution from the original tarot cards. Okay, so is there anything wrong with them? The answer is no. At least not from anything I've seen. Okay, there are absolutely potential dangers or complications that can come. I do wish I knew what I did with it. And I'm almost tempted to walk on to go and find it. But with that in mind, I think what I'm going to do instead, and I'll tell you what, considering I'm not going to find it right now, this much is blatantly obvious. Since I'm not going to find it right now, I can, if you guys decide that this is the way you want to go, I can certainly, turn around and do a show where I talk about the generalities of tarot. I've been reading tarot since I was 16. And as I mentioned earlier, am I willing to do readings for people? The answer is definitively yes. Hey Lacey, glad you could join us. Welcome aboard. I hope your day's been going well. You know, where it comes to you utilizing cards for your own purposes or by getting somebody else to do it for you, absolutely, you know, make certain that you first of all have a good feeling about the person you're trying to get to read for you. Okay. Now, myself, I've got in excess of 100,000 clients under my belt. Okay. And because, well, frankly, I've been reading for a long time. Um, the answer there, Eris, I do appreciate you asking. And yeah, absolutely, you can put the name up. Okay, this is one of those funny things about going, let's see if we can help you, if we can help each other. Nightmare, welcome aboard. Glad you could join us. Yeah, Eris, I really do appreciate the question. But absolutely, if you know the name of the person that you're thinking of, and clearly you do, absolutely put it out there. We'll call it a bonus for call it a bonus for the person, and if it generates some help, and absolutely, you know, the idea of this channel is simple. I desire to really help people connect with each other to find a way to work together. And given what Joe's already said, that would be greatly appreciated. Certainly by me, and I'd lay odds dollars to donuts that it will be by Joe as well. You know, and that's great. Because the reality is it's hard to find a decent reader. It's really difficult to find one. Okay. But if you can find one, okay, and just for those of you that are listening, to give you an idea of what has just happened here, Eris asked if she could put the name of a tarot card reader in my chat room. And I will tell you, the request to be able to do that is greatly appreciated. It shows a lot of respect, which is even more appreciated. But the person that has been named is quote unquote Gemma Jade. She does live oracle reading, one card readings on YouTube on Wednesdays. She does personal readings also off of YouTube. Now, the rest of it you get to look up because that's what we've got to work with. But I'm pretty certain if you type in Gemma Jade in YouTube, you'll come up with the information. And one thing I can tell you right off the bat there, Joe, okay, one person I can tell you right off the bat is that when it comes to the energy I get off of Eris, you can bet your bottom dollar she's giving you solid guidance. Okay, as far as this other person. And as it turns out, thank you so much, Nightmare. Gemma, remember, Nightmare's come back and spelled Gemma Gemma. Whereas when Eris put it in, she wrote it down as Gemma. So that J, that J sound comes somewhere. Okay. And this is one of those things. Like I've heard some YouTube channels, they go, no, we're not going to let that happen. Okay. From my standpoint, if I can get, if we can facilitate getting somebody connected, okay, this is a good thing. If it can help put people on a stable path to be able to move forward, this is what we're aiming for. It's time to remove the fear. Here's a neat little piece of information for those of you, and I guess this goes hand in hand with what you were asking there, Joe. Is tarot a bad thing? Now, many of you are Christian, okay, and you've been taught that tarot is an evil thing. Don't do it. One of the best tarot readers I ever came across, one of the most knowledgeable, grew up in the Vatican, where he was taught by the Catholic and by the Catholic Church in the Vatican how to read tarot. Okay, now why they call it evil, okay, when they're teaching it in the Vatican is anybody's guess. Okay, you know, and the reality of it is that when you look at any of the divination tools, and this goes right hand in hand with that issue of believing if God created everything. If it exists, there is a purpose for it. It does have a good side to it. Okay, there is certainly cautions around everything you work with, but you got to remember what you do with it, with the information, is the issue, not the information itself. Okay, that's where it gets to be really entertainingly complicated. Okay, now ultimately, the people in this, and I love it. I love this chat room. Okay, because I don't have to have all the answers. I cannot, for instance, I cannot tell you, here's who a good reader is online because I don't go to them. Okay, so I just don't have the information for you. But fortunately, people in the chat room here do. Now there are things I won't put up, and as I've indicated before, every now and again we get a robot popping up and going, "Here's a XXX site you should go to." Those I'm not going to post. I'll just flat out delete them. Sooner or later, things will get to the point where they're getting too hectic to be able to track, right? At which point, I will end up having to find a moderator that can handle some of this stuff. For the moment, it's working well enough, at least in my eyes. Now, of course, I might be wrong there. No, I don't know where you are, Eris, but I'm pretty certain you can't step on my toes right now. Okay. I'm pretty certain you're not in my house, so that eliminates that possibility. But yes, I do get the reference. There are many questions that people have about why, things like, why am I constantly going, making these silly choices? Why do I constantly have problems in certain areas? And this is where tarot, astrology, rune reading, all of these things can tell you a fair chunk about yourself. Palmistry is another tool that works well. Okay, same as the issue of past life regressions. But the key with a past life regression is remembering when you start pulling the information together. Okay. When you start pulling the information together, in regressions especially, what you'll find is, the way it was described to me is this. When a memory comes up, you know it's real if three things happen. The memory, the age that you're remembering, the terminology that you're using is age appropriate for the time. There will be an emotional response along with it. And the descriptions you use for whatever you're seeing are also age and period appropriate. Okay, for instance, when I found out about my early childhood this lifetime, I was in a room that was all these metal cabinets with rolls of tape running around in circles, toggle switches, flashing lights, and buttons. And all you heard was this whirring and clicking sound all over the place. Okay, when we started looking at after the regression, turns out what I was standing in, and I had never been in it. I've never been in a room like this. Okay, but you've seen them on TV. It was it was an old 1960s computer mainframe room. One thing I will tell you, for those of you looking to look into tarot, to take a look at past lives. Okay, if you're having trouble reading for yourself, the odds are all you have to do to get a clearer reading is sit down in front of the mirror and read for the person in the mirror, because what you're missing is that optical inference while you're trying to do the read, while you're trying to do the reading. If it's a constellation and nightmare, I have the same problem. Oh, what do we got? Well, thank you so much for that, Nightmare. Nightmare is just saying the fast way to reach Gemma Jade is to search at Gemma Jade, spelled with a G, Gemma.Jade YT. Okay, and that should bring you right up. Now, I'm wondering here, just because I'm curious, one of the advantages of having multiple monitors is I can do this. So I'm just going to take a peek and pop up what happens. Gemma.Jade YT. And if I do that, okay, comes up with all sorts of things. There we go. Yeah, and it brings up a number of access points to get a hold of her. So thank you very much for that, and for that, Nightmare. In all fairness, Nathan, much as that is usually a good idea, it's a little overstated. When I first got my first deck of tarot cards at 16 years old, okay, bear in mind I was not a reader even then, and I mean a reader of books. Okay, so when I got my first deck of tarot cards, I opened it up and I looked at it and went, "Oh, great." I did the appropriate thing as a child and was really thankful for it. Okay. Yeah, Nathan, there's no problem there. We're glad you're listening in. When I first got mine, I opened up the box, and first thing I noticed was, here is a box of picture cards. And bearing in mind I'm an English major, I looked at them and went, they're tarot. That's the way it was spelled. And I noticed the books behind them. And it's like, okay, so they're books. Didn't hold a lot of my attention. Little did I know that this was going to lay out the path that my life went down. Because before I read for a single person, I spent 7 years working with the cards and taking a look at questions that I knew the answers for. Okay, to see what the cards came up with. 7 years into it, I started reading for other people. Okay. Oh, is that what I understand that there? Somebody's been watching Harry Potter. Nathan's just said, I mean muggles, not people like you and I, aware ones with experience and, I think, wisdom. I don't know, I keep thinking with some of the stupid maneuvers I pulled in my life, not so certain about the wisdom thing. Okay, at least not in my eyes. But that's up to you guys to figure out. But you definitely have to, the one thing that is absolutely imperative is that you are open-minded enough to permit empirical evidence to show what's going on. Now, I remember the first 3 times I laid out the Celtic Cross, okay, with the tarot cards, the last card of each of those 3 random layouts put the moon in an upright position in the upright facing, because I read right side up and upside down. Okay, and I found that the moon right side up ended up in the 10th position 3 times in a row. Okay, now something we have to remember, if we go back to, I think, and I'll have to double check, but I think it was the mid 1600s, I worked for the government as a warlock, a witch that worked with the government in order to find other witches. Not one of my most auspicious lifetimes. Absolutely there, YJ. YJ's just saying empirical evidence is reality's best friend. It really is. And this is why I say when I talk about past lives I've had many, more often than not, I've had multiple people that have recognized me from another lifetime, knowing the same things I did. Okay. And some of them have been just mind blowing memories. Because the last thing I've ever wanted, and this is something that I do have to point out, well, don't have to, but I'm going to. Okay. When you're looking at past lives, remember there is only one person. There's a lot that will claim that they were, like, for instance, I think in my lifetime I heard of 3 or 4 people that claimed to have been Alexander the Great. Well, only one of them could have been. It's just that simple. Nylock, glad you could join us. It's we are active today, and the nice thing I'm really happy about myself is it's becoming more and more common. Now, right now, and I know for the longest time, I think it was World I was talking to, or maybe it was you, Nathan, that when you started out, there was only, 5 or 6 people in the room at a time when you went live. Okay. And now I'm starting to hit double digits on a regular basis. To me, this is a good thing. Of course, why people listen to me, sorry, I'll let other people figure that one out. Okay. Well, okay, I'll give you that. Yeah, Nathan, I'm just looking back up here a little bit. And Nathan's just saying, you didn't die and learn from it. That's wisdom. So what do you call it when you did die and learn from it? Which is the one I usually end up pulling off. I worked it out the other day, and this is the thing. If I look at it, I remember cowering in the caves as a caveman. And this is why I say that the whole thing. Journals, how you doing? Glad you could join us. The reality there, YJ is just, journals. I really appreciate that. Journals is just saying, please remember the thumbs up if you like the show. And that brings to mind, down in the bottom right hand corner of the show, you'll see a little button there. If you'd be kind enough, if you haven't done so already, if you'd be kind enough to hit the subscribe button, that would be really appreciated. The answer to your question there, YJ, is it possible people could be accessing the Akashic records? Certainly. It is also possible that a movie or a story that you read or had read to you may have caught your attention to the point that all of a sudden the imagination kicks in and goes, that's what I was. Okay. Now, to the best of my recollection at this point, I've never been a king. Okay. Like a king of anywhere. I do know that my family tree, that my ancestry puts my family bloodline on the throne during the War of the Roses. Definitely not one of our most auspicious lives, one of our most auspicious points, especially if you look at the way history tells it. It's neat, JCL. I'm glad you remember what I tell you. Because I tell you, I get off the phone, I get off this, and when I was doing readings by phone, I'll forget what I told people. I've got really good memory. It's about that long. And this is why people say, well, who said this? I don't know. But the moment I go to do another reading or another consultation for someone, the information comes back in one heck of a hurry. It's not technically recall because what I'm doing is I tap right back into it. Oh heavens, YJ, you should see the way I type on occasion. I used to be a lot better. Before my stroke, I would type at somewhere between 60 and 80 words a minute. Okay. After my stroke, it dropped to about 20 if I'm lucky, which is why I now dictate to my other half and she types it out for me. Makes it so much easier. Yeah, it can be, but memories can create even memories as in somebody talks about something going on. Okay, and it can create all kinds of neat little problems because many people will listen to it as some sort of an exciting life. For instance, real exciting if you're a desk jockey. Really exciting to think that at some point in my past, I was a person like Indiana Jones. Okay, has a lot. There's a lot of excitement that goes with it. In my case, I don't have. I have movies that set me off, and that's another thing that can trigger past life memories. Okay, or early life memories. Where they've been blocked out. Is movies can absolutely trigger memories. ID4 was problematic for me, right? Independence Day, when we were watching the show, the moment that the saucer broke orbit, I had a near panic attack right there in the theater. And as it turned out, there was a reason for that. The funny part about it there, YJ, is some of them got stronger. On the other hand, my tolerance for some of what I was seeing people do was absolutely shattered, which is one of the reasons why I've been looking at why I was looking away at walking away from it. Now, I was dealing on the phone when I started working on the phone. I was handling anywhere from 25 to 30 callers a night. Okay, by the end of it, I was down to, because of the way the line was set up or was being dealt with, I was down to 5 or 6. But with all of that, what I called in a lot of cases stupid questioning, and the obvious one is, I'm having financial difficulties. What should I do? My first instinct is to tell the person I never did do this to any one of my clients. Okay, is to tell them, look, quit phoning a line that charges 3.5 minutes for the person on the other end to say hi. Okay, this is just the reality behind it. But every trauma that somebody goes through has the propensity to enhance psychic ability, to enhance much more accurately psychic sensitivity. Okay, so the three most common ways of doing it. Okay, puberty is your most common trigger. Birth, everybody's born psychic. Okay, everybody brings that ability into this lifetime, but most people, by the time they're 4 or 5 years old, have been taught to shut it down by such very counterproductive comments like, "That's a wonderful imagination you've got. Now it's time to grow up." Okay, but birth, and many are born with it. Then you have puberty, which is a massive can trigger for a lot of people. Menopause, or penopause if you're male, is what I've been told it's called, is another one. And trauma is another one. Okay, every one of these will bring things a little stronger. Now, of course, in my case, when you think about it, dying is kind of traumatic for most people. Okay, by the time I was 10, I had been clinically dead 4 times. And when my ability became public knowledge, I was only 10 years old. Okay. See, something you got to remember, the psychic sensitivity, some of you bring it from a past life. Now, I was gifted way back when I left Egypt. I was gifted when I was in Rome. I was gifted when I was when I was working with the Inquisition, and boy was I good at that. Okay, of course the Inquisition wasn't about the witch hunts. The Inquisition was a whole different ballgame, but I was good at my job. Oh heavens, not anymore unless it really pushes it. I mean, I will not get on something that is going around in circles really fast. That will still give me motion sickness. But I used to have motion sickness down to a fine art. When I was 5, 6 years old, no, I'd have been much younger than that. I'd have been 2 or 3 because mom or dad would pick me up, put me in my car seat. I'd throw up. They'd clean me up, put me back in the car seat, then they'd start the car. Okay, so I had it down right to a fine art. Okay, the other thing that I found, and I think this is where I made a mistake, is when I was growing up, I learned, well, heck, 2,000 years ago, I learned this little trick. Nope, earlier than that. First time I learned how to heal somebody by touch was, I was still in Egypt at the time. And I learned how to actually put my hand on somebody, pull their illness out of them, absorb it into my own body, and then let my own body do the healing. Okay, really bad idea, by the way. Don't do that. Not a good move. But I've been doing this because my memories go by and go back so far. There are things that I've gone through that other people just frame. It's not they haven't gone through it. It's that they don't necessarily remember it. And here's the funny thing about healing. And you got to remember, healing is a very positive thing to do. Okay. But if you can heal by touch, you can also cause pain by touch. You can hurt. I strongly recommend against it. Because let's not forget, karmic law boils down to do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Hey Raven, welcome back. Glad you got back. You got everything sorted out, presumably. But past life memory, like a lot of the things that I remember now, I have trouble dealing with today's world because most of my strong memories come from way back, before all this modern tech came up. And of course, having a tendency of shorting it out doesn't exactly help. So I mean, I'm looking at this going, there's a lot of shifting happening going on that we really have to take a look at. And it does boil down to working with each other. If there are questions floating around, I've seen some. Uh-oh, I have to take this elsewhere. I will be right back. Here he is. Just give me a second. Sorry about that, guys. As I mentioned before, there are certain things that I look at. Like I've got a 17-year-old up front, and of course, if his mother phones, I will take the time out to pass it on in case you hadn't noticed. Okay, but when I look back at it, I remember a lot of things in past lives do bring back all kinds of neat little memories. Okay. And the reality is when I take a look at this, Okay, some of the information coming in this book is from my own past lives. Okay, as it used to say there was a show back in the 70s called Dragnet, and they always started the show off with the names and places have been changed to protect the innocent. Okay, well, I've done the same thing, but there's a lot of the information that I'm including in that saga to help people get a slightly better handle on it. Okay, that's just the way that works, at least from my standpoint. I'm just scrolling back up to make sure I didn't miss something. What we have to remember is everybody's life, like my life, is more science fiction than anything else. Okay, but I remember wholeheartedly, I remember in pretty solid detail the issues of World War One. Okay, because quite frankly, I was directly involved. It was funny. Well, it really wasn't. I was directly involved in the development of mustard gas. Only, and I didn't know, I didn't realize that I had remembered that much of it until a buddy of mine, I stumbled across a neat little chemical. Okay, and I'm not going to give it to you this time. Okay, way too many potential problems. But I was working for a country club, and I was trying to remove hard water. Okay, bear in mind I was houseman, so dishes was one of the things I worked with. And I was trying to remove hard water. And I found a chemical combination that worked like an absolute charm. Nothing else had worked. But I recognized the smell and couldn't place it. So I was talking to a friend of mine years later that happened to have he's gone through all the chemical training and what have you, and I told him what I'd done. And he looks at me and he goes, "You just made mustard gas. It's no wonder it peeled all the hard water off." You know, he says, "It's no wonder you did." And of course, as soon as he said it, it's like, "Oh, I remember how this stuff works." Now, bear in mind, I was thrown out of chemistry when in my first month of grade 8 chemistry. Okay, because we found out a neat little problem. There was an accident in the lab, right? Where we had 60 kids in the class, and the teacher turned around and says, "Okay, everybody clean up." So, unbeknownst to us, okay, we all broke the vials open. Well, half the class threw up on the spot like that, right? Me, it didn't bother me, so I carried on cleaning up. Half the class goes running outside. Pretty much all the class went running outside. Half of them threw up, right? And outside, all but 3 of them did, the teacher included, in the throwing up part. So he gets himself pulled together. I'm inside cleaning up. He calls me over and calls me over to the door. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm cleaning up." He says, "Do you have any idea what's in the air?" He says, "Well, based on the chemicalogical experimentation we were doing, I'd be inclined to say low-grade hydrochloric gas." He says, "And you don't see a problem with this?" I said, "Of course I see a problem with this." He said, "Everybody threw up. What do you think I'm cleaning up? Now, can I go back and finish?" Okay. And, he goes, "No, you can't." So they ended up yanking me out of chemistry altogether. I'm guessing it was to avoid potential problems, potential accidents that didn't register for me. Okay. Now YJ is asking, do babies have conscious past life memories that they just sort of lose as they mature? The answer is yes, quite often they do. Usually they're only fragments, but there are cases. I know of one case in particular where the child remembered fighting in World War II to the point of remembering his name, remembering the mission he was on, and where his plane went down. And when the parents went researching it, they found the downed aircraft right where the kid had laid it out. But by the time he was 4 years old, he couldn't remember any of it. So yeah, what happens is most of the time, like many times, people will have these memories, but it's chalked up to an imagination. Okay. Or they will, the parent will swear that their grandparent or their own parent who had recently passed away have reincarnated into their child. Okay. And what ends up happening is the child comes up with some memories. It doesn't happen often where you actually get that kind of solid corroboration. But are babies born with past life memories? The answer is yes. Okay. I've seen cases where kids actually remember the layout. I know of one in particular where they actually knew the layout of King Tut's tomb. They'd never seen the pyramid, but they sketched out the entire layout of it. This is where I was buried. And his comment was, "This is where I was buried with King Tut." And he laid out the chamber, and when you compared what he drew out and what was already known, it was just absolutely amazing. You know, so yeah, kids do remember them. Okay, many kids are born able to see the deceased. Okay, and they will talk to them. This is what you'll find a lot of people with imaginary friends are. Okay, you know, and I think I'm just going to do this. I just have to go and find it. Where did I hide it? I don't think I closed it down. I hope not. Nope. Going to open that up because Nathan, here you go. I know that, I was talking to Nathan the other day. Okay. And the answer to your question, Nathan, in case you didn't get the message, is absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to come back on. But this is Nathan's channel. Okay. And really some interesting stuff he covers there. You absolutely can. Raven, this is what I actually had to explain to a geneticist. Okay, in today's world, was that the double helix does not have all the answers, and the triple helix contains much of your past life memory, because cellular memory is carried down the line. So ancestral memory can create the illusion. It can absolutely create the illusion of a past life memory of your own. Whereas in point of fact, it turns out to be simply something the ancestors went through. You know, yeah, and that's what I go through. And I didn't see you come in there, Bomber. So my apologies first and foremost, but welcome aboard. Glad you could join us. My memories have been absolutely, mine have been crystal clear for years, but it's always nice, and this is why I sit on most of mine, okay, is because it's always nicer, in my opinion, to have somebody else go, "I remember you doing this." And absolutely, I will put this out there for you. If you remember me from another life, absolutely, I'd love to know about it. Okay, will I corroborate it if I remember it or if it meshes? The answer is absolutely, I will. Will I simply take what other people say and if somebody says, "Oh, you were this, I remember you as this person." If it doesn't mesh what I remember, Okay, and if I don't have some sort of way of corroborating it, I won't tell you you're wrong because I do not remember all of my lives. Okay, but I do remember the being alive at certain points where I couldn't have been another person. Okay, I'm just reading this here. Bomber Road, an elder Sasquatch from back home showed up on my dream the other night and mentioned double helix. He was telling me about DNA, but what do you think that was about? I'm no geneticist. Well, first and foremost, if he was talking about the double helix, um, Elder Sasquatch, we are dealing with a whole different advanced group. But they were undoubtedly trying to explain to you that you've got the information hidden inside you that you still have access to. Okay. And my suspicion, and that's all it is at this point, is you likely spent a lifetime as a shamanic Sasquatch. And yes, they do have shamans. But do understand, in today's world, we call it genetics or DNA. At that time, they didn't. Okay. That's not a problem, Bomber. I just like keeping an eye open. It was sort of something I came across that I've run into with some stores. With some banks, some restaurants. You walk through the door and somebody says hello. So I do try and keep an eye on it. Yeah, sad to say I have. I was actually in a house fire that didn't work out well for me. Mind you, I don't fear fire anymore. Okay. I've been in a crematorium. I actually worked at crematorium. You know, um, the reality of it is, this lifetime I've had 9 confirmed deaths and 1 possible. As far as other deaths go, I'll tell you the number of different ways I've died that I remember dying. Things like in a war, by hanging. That, by the way, is not as enjoyable a way of dying as you might think, especially when they didn't have the drop boxes at that point. You know, but when you take a look at it, okay, past lives can tell you a lot of things. I found out that one of the skills I came back into this life with is, now bear in mind I've never been trained to fight at all this lifetime. I was actually forbidden to. Okay. Um, from that standpoint. Oh, by the way, just back that up a fraction. When I said I've been in a crematorium, I have. I've also been burnt, not as a living person, but I've dealt with being on a pyre, on a Scottish pyre. But I was never in the World War II crematoriums. Okay, I was never in those. I lived through World War II. I just didn't have. I dealt with it. I just wasn't a POW in it. Yeah, and that's just it. When many people assume, and Dave off of Space Out Radio and I have had this debate for years, and we just agreed that we're just going to disagree and be done with it. Okay, in my opinion, the Sasquatch or Bigfoot is a Gigantopithecus, but they were not dumb people. Okay, they were actually quite a wise and very gentle race. Well, they still are. Okay, but we call it the double helix now. At the time, they just called it life and were done with it. They didn't bother with the name because at the time they were looking at, they would know that if you take this herb, it'll help do this. And that's where they left it. They didn't go to the point of breaking it down. Now, on the other hand, ancient Egypt had a neat little device. Okay, and I've got to go back and look at it and get a better description put together. They had a neat little device built with the Ankh, where they could actually operate inside somebody's body without breaking the skin. A lot more sanitary than today's methods. Okay, I'm just looking at what Bomber has written here. That dream was very intense. He looked like a giant chimp. Oh, that would explain a whole lot there. We're not dealing with Sasquatch there, Bomber. You're dealing with Awara. But the fact that you're dealing with Awara that was actually talking to you, this is a bonus. Okay. Yeah, with dark hair. They look very similar to the Sasquatch, by the way. Okay. See, the Wara is an off-world race. They look very similar to the Sasquatch, but are a whole lot more aggressive. As a matter of fact, they'll quite deliberately rip your arms off and beat you to death with the wet end. JCL is just asking, Keith, do we choose what we go through, or does that not matter? Every lifetime, when you go to come into into a lifetime, you literally set up who your parents are, and that is a discussion amongst different people. And this is part of what takes the 70 Terran years. Okay, is you turn around, which by the way, 70 Terran years is about a 20-minute holdup on their end, I think, if I'm doing the math right. But you set up who the parents are, whereabouts you're going to be born and raised. Okay, and you basically lay out the generalized wisdom that you're going to pick up on the path. But after you get here, it's your choices and your actions throughout your life that determine how that manifests. Well, maybe his name was Felix, although last I heard Felix was a cat. Oh, wait a minute, there was also Felix Unger from the Odd Couple. Do not ask me why that memory all of a sudden popped up. Okay, but yeah, by the feel of it there, Bomber, you're referring to Awara. Okay. And I wonder if that's actually in book one. I think it is. Just taking a quick look here, because I think in... Yeah, the Awara, okay. I do actually have a picture of Awara when the second printing for this comes out. I do actually have the picture of Awara available for it. Which reminds me, I have to get those out to him. The honest answer there, Joe, as far as Goatman goes, I honestly don't know. I've never looked into him. But I'm betting dollars to donuts that you're looking, depending on his height, you may be actually dealing with Nudaki, right? And that is what most people refer to as a satyr. Now, most satyrs are only around the 3-foot mark, but just like with humans, there are taller ones. Oh, the Raven, that race is spelled Oarra. Okay, they are an off-world race that looks very similar to the Sasquatch, but though their arms are a little longer, they walk more along the lines of what a gorilla does. Okay, it's sort of halfway between a gorilla's walk and the upright walk of the Sasquatch. It's just when they start to move, they go down on all fours. They make much better time. Something I'm looking at there, Nathan. Like I'm in the process, as it turns out, with that 2 month mess that I had, I'm in the process of getting the rest of them done. As a matter of fact, I don't know where the list went. But like I said, what are we? These have to be sent off today, so I will do that. The batch just sent off to my artist. A couple of things I'm looking at regarding that is taking the pictures. Okay, taking the pictures that are drawn and turning them into, like, I will be putting them in the second volume of Races of the Worlds. But I will also, I'm seriously looking at creating a coloring book for children where just the line work. Okay, so that people can color it. Okay, with some of them. But that's one of those things when I mentioned I was going to be getting into some of the merchandising stuff that's available. I.e., as a matter of fact, that just dawned on me. I'm looking into, and will come as soon as I can sort it around, will be things like t-shirts, coffee cups, calendars, this sort of thing. The easy to replicate things to cover various different things I'm working on. It's just one of these things that, you put it together, you copyright the thing, you send it out. This is going to be coming through while I'm in the publishing company that I'm in the middle of really enhancing. That does not surprise me there, Bomber. In all fairness, until I brought it up, as far as I know, nobody has actually had any real information on it. So I'm just going to pull this up. And like I said, the reality of it is the Races of the Worlds I wrote literally as a reference manual. Okay, now your average Wara is 5 to 6 feet in height. Some of them are taller, okay, but the average one is only the 5 to 6. Okay, they're primarily vegetarian, but they will, they will absolutely, eat meat. They are omnivorous. Okay, you will find that it's funny, they have a matriarchal hierarchy that is a dictatorship. In other words, the head female, the eldest female, is determined by combat and is a very violent race. They don't have a trial by combat that ends in a draw. They have a trial by combat that ends in death. Cuts down on the odds of having a contender. Okay. Very much. And I don't know, just to put that in perspective, here's the other thing that I've also, and this is just a real brief run on it. If you've ever seen the picture of the segmented starships, kind of look like the building blocks from when you were a kid that stick together on one end. Okay, those are Warren ships. Well, you got to remember, okay, the Warren are a powerfully built race, but any race, when an individual focuses on the brain, the muscles don't tend to grow that big. Okay, because they're focusing elsewhere. Not all of them do. And this is why I say, Bomber's just saying the one he was dealing with didn't seem to be violent. And this is why I say, whatever race you're dealing with, whatever species you're dealing with, No, you cannot paint them all with one brush. Doesn't work well. Okay. Hey Saint, welcome aboard. Glad you could make it. I'm not certain how long ago you got here, but I try and keep an eye on things to see who's coming through the door. Because I really do appreciate each and every one of you for coming and spending your precious time with me. We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm finding many people from past lives that are resurfacing. Okay, some of my best friends I knew centuries back. I remember one of my good friends from years ago. We were on chain gang together. Okay, like I said, not all of my lifetimes were, shall we say, above board. Okay, but the reality is, past life memories absolutely have a direct impact on this life. You know, I've seen people. I loved when I met my former girlfriend from 1828. She recognized me first, but her husband was so open minded about it, and she asked him right in front of me. She goes, "Well, you don't have a problem that this is my ex boyfriend?" And he goes, "A problem?" He says, "He's your ex first of all." He goes, "Second of all, he's your ex from 200 years ago. Why would I have a problem with him?" But it was the husband that ensured that the next 3 years, the next 2 years running, that I went out to their place for dinner. Okay, met him, met their son. It was remarkable. Oh, no, Nathan. You're talking about the Pleiadian hybrids that teleported out. They were not tourists. The one Don was the one and I finally remembered what his name was because I drew a blank when we were talking about it. Don was the senior, but he had brought another chap with him to show him the ropes for operating on Earth. Then they had a Nord with them and a human. And when they left by a transporter. Okay. I spent a lot of years. Yeah, like I remember spending a lifetime, and this is why I know what the Gray's homeworld is like. Zeta Reticuli is a really cute place. At least the planet is. The star itself, I wouldn't recommend walking around on. But yeah, when we're dealing with some of these species, some of you will have memories that make it difficult to coordinate on this world because your memory from the past life, okay, sets you up in a major problem trying to adapt to here because the memory holds too tight. And it does happen, not often, but it does happen. Okay. In all fairness, Nathan, there's a lot of information that goes around, that we deal with, that it's difficult to keep up with some of it. How I managed to remember it is anybody's guess. Because I will tell you, my memory for names and for time, this lifetime, is problematic at best. Okay. But I know I left you a note there, Nathan. We're going to have to connect to pick a day when we can come back on. It was a lot of fun the last time. And this is why I said absolutely drop in and take a look at some way he goes through. And that would make sense. If you think, Bomber's just saying he got the impression that this individual was considered frail by his own race. Many scientists are considered frail. And when you think about it, they're using their brain. They're not exactly weightlifters and combat specialists. Although I have seen some that fit. You know, You take a look at the modern world, okay, and you look at people like, well, we can go with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura, and Lou Ferrigno, all of which were powerhouses when they were younger, but had minds that were incredible. And I'm not talking about their personality, I'm talking about their mind. Okay. But one of the biggest things that we have to remember when you remember a past life, okay, make note of it. Many times, this information that you hang on to can be translated into modern use. Now, I know lifetimes back, I knew how to use an abacus without even thinking about it. I've got to remind myself this time. You know, even in today's world, something to keep in mind is in today's world, the two most wasted commodities that I've seen in society around the globe is the wisdom of the seniors and the enthusiasm of the youngsters. Okay. And, this is something that we have to look to because it's those people that have the drive, that have the insights in how to make things work. One thing I did find is if you're looking at your current life, if you've got a real propensity, and I forget who it was that mentioned it in the room today, but if you've got a real propensity to stay away from people, to isolate yourself. Okay, I have spent a lot of lifetimes where I did not have a close knit group of friends. Okay, when I came out of coming out of Egypt was fine, but I was very isolated as far as when I was working for the government as a warlock. I did not have a lot of friends. Of course, that might have something to do with what I was doing for a living. As a thief in England during the time of during the 1300s, I really didn't have a lot of friends because I'd steal from anybody that had lockbox. But I'd only go after the ones where the people told me that where I caught wind that they said it was unpickable. I didn't agree with them, so I proved them wrong. You know, but if you look at your past lives, I remember what it's like to have more money than I knew what to do with, and that has been something I've always had a feel for and no interest in. You know, this lifetime I've had virtually no interest in it until in all fairness, about 3 days ago, where I all of a sudden went, I'm going to build an empire, and this is how I'm going to do it. Where I will have the money to be able to do whatever I choose. Okay. Now, bear in mind, I will stick to the legal stuff. But I came to the conclusion that I am going to clear off. I'm going to get rid of all my debt. I'm going to get to the point where I have a much higher income level. Okay, so I can have all the finer things in life. But that's just what I'm aiming for. I did come to the conclusion with being unemployed, getting another vehicle does not make any functional sense. Yeah, have you ever noticed that you guys? Bomber's just mentioning this one chap he was dealing with had a tendency of talking to himself. The answer to your question there, Joe, is yes. Trioxin is actually it's actually literally as it suggests. It's a three-part compound, but it's a gas. Okay, it's also a toxin. Okay, problem is you take a drop of this stuff and you can wipe out a room. Okay. We've already got speeder bikes. They've already got them. But what they've done is they've ranked gravity backwards, and that's where they're running into the problem. You know, yeah, that I know of, and I cannot list them all off, so don't even go there. When we start looking at these compounds, this chemical trioxin, if you look at the element at the periodic table of elements, I think when I was going there was something like 104. I've seen a periodic table with 256 or 258. So yeah, mankind is not anywhere in the ballpark of where they can be. Um, Easiest way to look at the speeder bikes: watch Star Wars. Those are not just a vehicle built for the Star Wars set. Okay, they have right now hover bikes. Okay, they don't work as well as they'd like, but they do work. Okay, but like I said, they're reading gravity backwards, and that's where the problem is. Okay, but the speeder bikes you're referring to, the real trick to it is the balance point. Okay, but they are built with a gyroscopic balance, which automatically adjusts. I believe in aeronautics it's called the ailerons and something else. My father was an aircraft mech. I did not pick up the linguistics very much. You know, Now, I do suggest one very important thing here, Bomber. With the amount of information you've dropped here, do take the time as soon as you can to write all this out in a file. Because the more information you have contained, the easier it's going to be able to piece things together. Now, I will caution you, as you're writing it down, new memories will come up that you may be inclined to say, I don't know if this is real or if it's just me filling in the blanks. The reality is, when you're looking at past lives, okay, or only vaguely remembered memories, those little bits and pieces that come to light, more often than not, are the accurate thing. Yeah, I somehow didn't think you had. This is why I'm saying, take the time to document it. Okay, because it's encounters like that and it's memories like that that will help you remember yourself and your own encounters. See, the primary reason for coming to this planet at all, okay, to coming into existence, not just on this planet, but in the third dimension, okay, is to literally remember yourself. Okay, because when your soul arrived, okay, it's split. Hence, you've got a soulmate. It's the two halves of the first soul that break. Okay, when you have a twin flame, you take those two souls. They break again. Okay, so you'd have four fragments at this point. This guy here is a twin flame to both this one and this one. Okay, so, and ultimately you really are looking at a three-way connection. And then as they split down, everybody down each line is your soul family. Okay, but you only ever have one soul mate. Okay, it's just that both, in order to get to that point of merging, you both have had to draw back all of the memories from the past lives, from the different incarnations. Because as you go through a life and you find your soulmate, which, by the way, you may not find in this lifetime, okay, when you do connect and after both corporeal bodies are passed, okay, they merge to become a higher entity. Once you get all the lower vibrations brought up, now you're ready to move to the next level. Okay. That one, and I'm just going to mark that down. And again, Raven, this is one of those neat little things. There's a lot of confusion around it. So I'll put it to you this way. I'll do the same thing with you that I did with JCL when they came up with the question about past lives. To ensure you're able to be here, aside from Thursday, which is not going to happen on, okay, what day of the week works better? Like, what day would you like to tangle with the soulmate issue? Okay, because for me, it's like I've told people, if you've got a question, if you've got a topic you desire to have, can they have dealt with, absolutely ask me, and I will do my best to fit it in. Okay. What am I looking at here? Oh, well, I'll have to take your word for that one. I actually do not recall Night of the Return of the Living Dead. Well, actually, I recall it. It was funny. Well, that sounds really twisted. Are you talking the original Night of the Living Dead? Like we're talking from back in the late 60s, early 70s? Or are you talking the modern version? Where are we looking here? Just quickly reading down below. There's yeah. Don't get too caught up on that. On the issue of I wish I had done this. If I'd have actually done what I knew I should have done, right now I'd be a multimillionaire. At which point I would have already had a publishing company up and running. I'd have already started to build the Ark. And no, I'm not building a boat. Okay, don't like the water that much. Besides that, I remember the Great Flood. And rest assured, much as Noah's Ark was a real Ark, it wasn't the only boat that was used. It just happened to be the biggest one. But I will tell you this, like thunderstorms and rainstorms, I still love the sound of. But every time I hear it, I still hear the screaming that was going on. As people fought for their lives and slowly one by one drowned. I do appreciate that, JCL. The reality is the more information that I can bring, the more interesting topics, that people are interested in, not just what I'm sitting on, because let's face it, I'm just not that interesting, at least not in my eyes. But I do understand there is an excellent, there is a staggering amount of misinformation out there. And no, I am not the only person that knows what's going on. I just happen to be stubborn enough, and if you will, I am secure enough in my own knowledge that I just don't question it anymore. You know, yeah, and that's what's this? Yeah, I can relate to that there, Bomber. Bomber's just saying that Bomber doesn't have enough room on his phone to record it. You know, and that would be a big problem. It was funny. I had years ago. Oh, well, the first thing we have to understand there, Raven, is when they talk about they had one of the or two of each type of animal. First of all, they didn't have two of each type of animal on the planet. They had two of each type of animal that they could get a hold of. But when the flood happened, it didn't wipe out the entirety of Earth. Okay, but what they did was the cages they put them inside were strong enough to hold them. Half the reason for the size of it was to make sure there was enough food there to feed them until they could get them to dry ground. And rest assured, the thing you got to remember is when the ark was loaded with foodstuffs, a lot of it was put in there in the way of vegetation. They did not take a lot of meat for themselves, and even for the carnivores that they did take on board. Okay, the thing you got to remember is that they took enough on to keep them fed, but they could fish. And let's face it, you have a flood, the fish don't drown. Okay. Oh yeah, there were a lot. Oh, thank you so much, Bomber. I do my best to keep in mind who people are, but it can be a little bit of a challenge on occasion. I'm one of the few people I've met that in all my lifetimes that I've remembered or that anybody else has remembered, I've never actually lived a lifetime as a female, ever. Okay. And there are very few people that go down that road. Yeah, okay. Yeah, trioxin is an actual compound. I should go back and watch that show one day. I haven't watched it in years. But the really neat part about the Dawn of the Dead, about the Walking Dead and what have you, was when the first when the first Dawn of the Dead came out, was the same time. It was about a year and a half before I ended up walking out of the morgue, which really was. When you look back on it, was kind of an interesting coincidence as far as the timing of that movie and the timing I ended up in the morgue. And it does explain rather clearly why the poor technician passed out when I got up. Okay, it's kind of like when I went in for lower abdominal exploratory surgery in 1975, right when the original Exorcist came out. Scared the living daylights out of the poor nursing staff. Right, because when I woke up, I was laying down. I just literally just sat up this way, looked directly at the nurse, and went, "When's lunch?" My voice was so low, it was just absolutely reverberating. But the door to the recovery room was still swinging when I sat up. Tell you, did that ever cause a stir for them? So I mean, we're looking at a lot, but past lives can bring about a lot of understanding. I didn't realize that. Well, this will explain why my throat's starting to seize here. Um, I'm gonna go back up here for a second. And who was it? No, Raven. Maybe it was Raven. Just quickly scanning up here. That one. Raven. If you would be so kind, I will absolutely deal with a more in-depth explanation of how soulmates work. As a matter of fact, not in this one, but in the saga, I do actually explain in a lot more written detail how soulmates, why they came about, how they came about, and how you reconnect with them. That's literally that's one of those funny things I am including in the Yldrbacian Chronicles. But with regards to a video, absolutely. Drop me a line. Let me know which day you can make that you can certainly be there for. Because the way I see it, you brought up the topic. It would be nice to be able to make sure you're there. In any event, we have definitely gone overtime here, which I'm not complaining about at all. But I can feel my throat starting to seize, not to mention my leg. So, I am going to say thank you. Ken, Happy New Year to you too. Didn't see you come in. I am going to turn to, call tonight, but I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate the support and the encouragement that I get from you guys. And, I will be back again. Okay, quite frankly, I'll be back again tomorrow from 4:30 to about 6:30 again. Okay, and we'll see where things go. But until then, do take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive.